I ranked 18 of the best ETFs that pay monthly dividends. You know it. I know it. Passive income, monthly dividends, living off of dividends is the goal and dream for most, if not all, dividend investors. Now, there's literally hundreds, if not thousands of covered call ETFs, so I'm going to show you which ones are going to be the best ones to invest in and some of the worst ones to invest in and to completely avoid. So in this video, I made a list of 18 of the most popular high dividend ETFs that pay monthly dividends. And with that in mind, I'm going to be ranking all of them on a tier list from the best tier, good tier, average tier, med tier, and then worst tier. Now, before we start ranking all 18 of these ETFs, I want to let you know that these ETFs, or covered call ETFs, at the most basic level, buy stocks and then sell or write call options on those underlying stocks, which generate premiums and even regular dividend income. The outcome is going to be, of course, those sweet, juicy, high dividends with some downsides like very limited upside potential, higher tax implications at times, and even carrying most, if not all, the downside risk, so keep that in mind. You might be wondering how I'm going to rank all these ETFs or score them. That's a great question. I'm going to compare each ETF based on the underlying index it tracks, and I'm also going to compare them all based on things like expense ratio, dividend yield, total returns, NAV erosion, taxation, and even dividend stability. Additionally, also my own personal preference, and these will all come into play to rank whether or not the ETF is a best tier or even as worst as a worst tier ranking. Ideally, you want to own the ETFs in the best tier or even the good tier ranking to have the best chance at the best returns possible and even the most stable and best dividend income every single month in your covered call ETF of choice. Of course, if you want to see my entire ETF portfolio, where I'm literally buying dividend ETFs like SPHD and DGRW, which aren't monthly payers, but that's okay, you can see it for completely free on the Blossom app. Yes, Blossom is free. It's a free investing app. You can see my buys and even my ETF portfolio for free. And yes, I will see it there in Blossom. Use the link in the description of this video or in the pinned comment section. And yes, I will see it there on Blossom. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first ETFs on this list are going to be S&P 500 covered call ETFs. Now, 4 of the best in this category are going to be JEPI, ISPY, TSPY, GPIX, SPYI, and then XYLD. Let's start with JEPI. This ETF is by JP Morgan and it's based on an actively managed lower risk version of the S&P 500 index. JEPI uses ELNs for its S&P 500 options exposure. The expense ratio is 0.35% and the dividend yield sits at around 7 to 8%, which is pretty solid. JEPI will be taxed mostly at the higher ordinary income tax rate or unqualified dividend income and have some return of capital as well, and a medium level of monthly dividend stability. So with that, I'm going to give JEPI a good tier ranking since there are definitely other better options on this list, all in my opinion. ISPY by ProShares targets high income and even S&P 500 returns over the long term. The expense ratio is 0.55% and the dividend yield is around 11 to 12%. SPYI will be taxed mostly at the higher income of ordinary income tax rate as unqualified dividends and have some return of capital with a low and volatile amount of a monthly dividend stability, so that is a big zonk. ISPY is definitely a solid ETF if you want a higher dividend yield than something like JEPI, but with the low and volatile amount of monthly dividend stability, that is a big zonk, and even the higher expense ratio is also a zonk as well. So with that, I'm going to give ISPY just an average tier ranking. SPYI is literally one of my absolute favorite ETFs by NEOS because of its higher dividend yield and also active tax management to benefit come tax season if you are a monthly dividend income investor. The expense ratio is 0.68% and the dividend yield is around 13 to 14%. SPYI is actually the best for tax efficiency and even NEOS products as it uses index options which are classified as Section 1256 contracts. As a result, this will lower your tax rate of a 60-40 tax rate of mostly qualified dividends and then unqualified dividends as well, and even some return of capital additionally. As a bonus, the monthly dividend stability is going to be very stable and very high as well. SPYI or SPYI is literally one of the best covered call ETFs for S&P 500 exposure. NEOS did a great job on this fund and I applaud them for that. So it's definitely one of the best ETFs for monthly dividends and gets a best tier ranking on this list. TSPY is Tap Alpha's SPY growth and daily income ETF, so it's the newest one on this list. TSPY tracks the S&P 500 via SPY ETF holdings and adds a daily income enhancement strategy that uses 0 DTE covered calls to generate options premiums. The expense ratio is 0.68% and the dividend yield is around 9 to 10%. Since TSPY uses SPX index options, it can then be taxed or treated as Section 1256 contracts of a lower tax rate of the 60/40 tax rate of mostly qualified dividends, and then of course short-term tax treatment, but TSPY is going to be more tax efficient than other stock-based option ETFs. And of course, TSPY has a high amount of dividend stability. TSPY, in my opinion, is a very underrated covered call ETF in this category. It has tax efficiency, daily call expiration, which can allow less upside cap and even better growth participation in the future. It uses real shares and doesn't use synthetics, and it definitely deserves a best tier ranking in my opinion on this list. XYLD is a Global X's S&P 500 covered call ETF. The expense ratio is 0.6% and the dividend yield is around 13 to 14%. It literally says on the website that the fund may be taxed as income of the dividends, and the dividends from the underlying stock holdings are not considered qualified and then thus will be considered unqualified dividends. And lastly, the dividend stability is going to be medium for XYLD. So with that, in my opinion, there's going to be better options on this list than XYLD. There are other options with lower expense ratios and more tax efficiency, even better dividend stability, so XYLD will definitely get an average tier ranking on this list. GPIX or GPIX is Goldman Sachs S&P 500 Core Premium Income ETF. And this fund, what makes it pretty unique is that it's actively managed to keep income more consistent. So it's meant to keep your dividend income every single month super stable and very consistent. The expense ratio is 0.29% and the dividend yield is around 8 to 9.5%. And then GPIX doesn't do anything really for a tax standpoint or a tax perspective, so most of its dividends will then be unqualified dividends at the ordinary income level or also having some ROC as well. GPIX's dividend stability is going to be very high and stable, one of the best in the game for this category for dividend stability. So with that in mind, GPIX is a great ETF. It has a low expense ratio on this list. The yield's going to be super solid and it has some great income stability as well. So I think, in my opinion, it deserves a best tier ranking on this list. Up next is everybody's favorite, and that's going to be NASDAQ 100 covered call ETFs in this list. We're going to be ranking 4 of the best in this category, like JEPQ, GPIQ, QQQI, and then QYLD. Let's start with JEPQ. This ETF is by JP Morgan, and it's based on an actively managed portfolio that is similar to the NASDAQ 100 index. JEPQ utilizes ELNs for NASDAQ 100 exposure, and the expense ratio is 0.35%, and the dividend yield is around 7 to 8% as well. JEPQ will then be taxed at that most highest income level of ordinary income and have some return of capital or ROC as well, with a medium level of monthly dividend stability. JEPQ will then get a good tier ranking, since I think that there are definitely going to be better options on this list. So JEPQ just gets a good tier ranking. QQQI or QQQI is one of my favorites by Neos, and I'm pretty biased, but I think Neos is a great ETF fund manager. Neos products are literally the best for high yields and not yield traps, as well as active tax management, which is nothing I've ever seen in the covered call space. The expense ratio is going to be 0.68%, and the dividend yield is going to be around 15 to 16%. QQQI is best for tax efficiency, since it uses Section 1256 contracts, which are then taxed at the lower tax rate of mostly qualified dividends at the 60/40 tax rate, and then unqualified dividends for the rest, and of course some ROC as well. The monthly dividend stability is going to be very stable and even very high in Neos fashion. This ETF is easily one of the best covered call ETFs I've ever seen for NASDAQ 100 exposure, and then will then deserve a best tier ranking on this list. GPIQ is Goldman Sachs NASDAQ 100 Core Premium Income ETF, and it's actively managed to keep income more consistent, so it's pretty good if you want consistent income every single month. The expense ratio is 0.29%, and the dividend yield is going to be around 11 to 12%. The taxes are going to be mostly unqualified dividends at the ordinary income level, and as well as some ROC built into the tax purposes for this ETF. The dividend stability is going to be very high and stable for GPIQ. So with that in mind, GPIQ is a great fund with a low expense ratio on this list. It has a solid dividend yield and great income stability, so it's a great fund, and GPIQ definitely deserves a best tier ranking. QYLD is a Global X's version of the NASDAQ 100 covered call fund, and the expense ratio is 0.6%, and the dividend yield is going to be 13 to 14%, so definitely up there on the yield. QYLD is not the most tax efficient, and it's not the best for tax efficiency. Finally, the dividend stability is going to be medium for this fund. QYLD definitely has a ton of better competitors and a ton of better options that are better to choose from. And with that, I'm going to give this ETF just an average tier ranking, which is pretty fair for this fund. Up next, we have OMA or OMAH, the Vista Shares Target 15 Berkshire Select Income Fund. OMA invests in basically Warren Buffett's holdings as well as BRKB or Berkshire Hathaway, and then gives you monthly income as well. The expense ratio is insanely high, literally kind of highway robbery at 0.95%, which is pretty crazy. The dividend yield is at least up there to make up for that high expense ratio, and it is targeted to be at 15% for its yield, which is a projection and a target, so it's not guaranteed, but 15% for a target yield is pretty high and pretty crazy in my opinion. OMA's tax implications are going to be mostly unqualified dividends as well as mostly return of capital to start off for this new fund, where the dividend stability is going to be too early to tell, and it's going to be a medium just for my own sake. So with that, I'm going to give OMA just an average tier ranking, and it can go up over time to maybe a good tier ranking, but for now, it's just average. Coming up next, we have a large cap focused covered call ETFs. 3 of the best in this category are going to be DIVO, SPHD, and then DGRW. DIVO is Amplify's CWP Enhanced Income Fund, and it invests in high quality large cap companies with a history of dividend and earnings growth, which is great for a strategy. The expense ratio is 0.56%, and the dividend yield is going to be around 4 to 5% as well. DIVO is taxed mostly as ordinary income from my own research or unqualified dividends with a high amount of dividend stability. So with that, I think DIVO is a great fund and a great ETF. Not only does it have great returns, but a sustainable dividend yield and even some dividend growth built into the fund. DIVO definitely gets a best tier ranking on this list, and it is a best fund for monthly cover call dividend income. SPHD is Invesco's S&P 500 high dividend low volatility fund. The expense ratio is 0.3% and the dividend yield is going to be around 3 to 4%. Now all of its dividends are going to be taxed as unqualified dividends or ordinary income with a solid amount of dividend stability as well in the fund. With all that in mind, I have no problems with SPHD. I think it's a great fund. It has a great track record, and you also get monthly income, which is an added bonus. You also get dividend stability, a low expense ratio, and I think it's a best tier ranking and definitely deserves a best tier ranking on this list in my opinion. DGRW is WisdomTree's US Quality Dividend Growth ETF. The expense ratio is 0.28% and the dividend yield is on the lower end of our spectrum of around 1 to 2%. Taxes are completely normal for this fund at all unqualified dividends for this type of fund, and it's going to be a very volatile amount of dividend stability or income stability, so it's going to be a very volatile payment, so expect that every single month. DGRW definitely gets a good tier ranking, but hey, it does have a great track record, which is why I bumped it up to a good tier ranking instead of like a mid tier or an average tier, and it has great built-in capital appreciation and capital growth, which is great for income-focused investors, as well as those who want to have some great total returns in the long run. Next up, we have SVOL or SVOL, the Simplified Volatility Premium Income ETF. SVOL or SVOL is kind of a complex ETF to just understand and take in as a beginner. It's a very complex fund, and basically the fund shorts VIX or VIX positions and provides investors an optimized exposure for monetizing the premiums in the VIX futures market. So if you don't know what I just said, then this is a very complex strategy, mostly for experienced and even professional level investors. So keep that in mind. The expense ratio is up there at 0.72%, and the dividend yield is going to be around 20%, which is insanely high and great for income-focused investors. Now, one of the biggest zonks is going to be NAV erosion, which is what SVOL has been experiencing pretty recently, so that is a big zonk. Now, it was kind of confusing to find the tax implications, but I'm assuming it's going to be mostly unqualified ordinary income taxations, as well as return of capital, where the dividend stability is going to be just at medium. You have expense ratios being high, NAV erosion, total returns being underperforming other funds on this list, and I think that SVOL just gets a mid tier ranking and can be average or good if you are an experienced level investor or even a professional investor, so SVOL just gets a mid tier ranking. Next up, we have FEPI, the Rex Fang Innovation Equity Premium Income ETF. FEPI holds a basket of large cap tech stocks and then writes or sells covered calls on those stocks, generating high monthly income. The expense ratio is 0.65% and the dividend yield is going to be around 30% exactly. In terms of the taxes on the dividends, it will be mostly unqualified dividends taxed at the highest rate of ordinary income and some return of capital as well. Lastly, the dividend stability is going to be low to medium. FEPI is a very unique fund. It's very concentrated and heavy into big tech, so that can definitely increase your risk in the long term. And overall, FEPI deserves an average tier ranking, so it's going to be in the average tier ranking list for this fund. Now, we have YieldMax's monthly income ETFs, like those single stock ones. So I personally don't want to get into the weeds of this fund or these types of products because I don't really like them all that much. The expense ratios are going to be insanely high of over 1% plus for all of these types of funds. You also hold synthetics, which are not real shares of the underlying index or the underlying stock. So they will also heavily underperform the market and their underlying positions, and you don't want to track or just underperform the market or those positions. So that's also a huge zonk on my ranking. Another red flag is going to be NAV erosion, which is going to be insanely high. And then for taxes, it's going to be mostly return of capital for your dividends being taxed and a low and volatile amount of dividend payments. So all of these just scream red flags and no bueno. So with all that in mind, YieldMax single stock products like NVDY, TSLY, CONY, PLTY, MSTY, all the Ys get a worst tier ranking on this list. I'll also give a shout out to YieldBoost, which is a newer product similar to YieldMax that is going to be by Granite Shares ETFs. I actually met Will Ryan, the CEO of Granite Shares, who told me a lot about YieldBoost in a party in Las Vegas, which was pretty cool. And I actually like YieldBoost a lot more than YieldMax, which is why it's on this list and which is why I'm comparing it to YieldMax as a superior product to YieldMax. Now, in terms of the research, YieldBoost is a complex product. However, from what I've learned from Will and from other ETF investors that are in dividends, it is a superior product to YieldMax. So for now, at least, it's going to get a meta ranking on this list. So there you guys have it, 18 of the best and even some of the worst high dividend monthly covered call ETFs that pay monthly dividends. I just want to say congratulations to all the funds that made the best tier and even the good tier, and a huge round of applause to all the funds that even made this list to begin with. So congratulations to all the funds in this video. Now, if you guys like this video, please give it a like because this Q puppy did. Now, if you want me to rank other growth ETFs, you can see it in this video right here, where I literally rank some of the best growth ETFs to invest in for the long run. Love you guys so much. Continue to crush the stock market and take it easy. Peace.